Okay, welcome everybody. Just finishing getting set up here, so give us a second and we'll get started in just a moment. Say hi, let us know you're watching so we know you're there. We're going to start in just a moment. Feels like the camera is capturing just so much more than it normally does. I just shared it.
Okay.
We need to make sure people see it. Would you comment on the post just so it gets bumped?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I see a couple of you guys are here. Let us know that you're watching. We're saying hi to you. Hello. We have a thumbs up. We appreciate thumbs ups. Welcome, Judy. It's just about time to start. We'll give a second for a couple more people to join us.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Oh, let me actually pull up the live stream document that we use. Okay, welcome guys to NAMA, Nosework Ask Me Anything.
Our first one of 2025.
Yep, first one of 2025. Hope everyone had a good new year. We're going to be speaking today about Advanced Foundation and NW1, ORT, AKC Novice, all of the competitions that are in this kind of realm of competition level.
The first one or two things.
Yes.
That you're going to do.
And this is going to correspond to our featured course of the next month, which is going to be our Advanced Foundation course. I just finished working on it, so all the videos are up. We got some new things. I'm planning on adding more. Remember, on all of the courses that I have on my website, if you guys have bought them, if there's something that you'd like more detail on or would like to see more of, let me know, because I can make new videos for you guys and I can keep supplementing what is on the website. So just let us know, and that's something
and we
I
also love to know that you're watching them, and you know,
a few people have commented on the courses, and that's really appreciated. I like to know that people are actually using what I'm creating for them. Yeah. What news do we have, Natalie?
Well, early access class lists are going out today.
For February.
For February, yes. Either, depending on how long it takes, either right after this live stream or after my evening class. So sometime before midnight. We're about to go to California.
Yeah, we hope to see
Friday.
You there. California is going to be fun.
This Sunday, we're speaking at the IPCA and ICSW joint conference.
Is that being live streamed, or is it only in person?
It's only in person, unfortunately, for those of you who can't make it. It's Saturday and Sunday. I think, what are there, 6 speakers, something like that. So that should be fun. Mm-hmm. And then for the next week that we're there, we're going to be doing classes and private lessons and a game day and various things. So if you haven't seen info on that, because I know Facebook doesn't show everybody everything, let us know if you're interested in something, because we still have a couple spots available here and there.
Yeah, I have lots of spots for private lessons and things like that. And then after that, we're going to be in Tennessee judging.
Yes, judging. I think it's an Elite 1 or something like that.
Yep. Where else are we going? I'm going to be in Pittsburgh a couple times. The next couple months. What else?
Our connection is unstable.
No, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that.
Let's see. I'm going to be doing a seminar in the Kansas City, Missouri area, and COing an ORT, and Michael's going to be judging that ORT. So if you're in that area, maybe we'll get to see you.
You're going to be at camp?
Yes, I'm going to be teaching at Virginia Camp, which I think is maybe open. I'm not sure actually if it's open or not, but
that would be on the Dogs of Course website.
Dogs of Course, yes. That's in April. And then the very next weekend, Michael is teaching at Training Fest Southeast. And I'm hopefully my dog gets in. I want to run my puppy in that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all over the place this spring.
Yeah, we are truly all over the place. So yeah, that'll be fun.
In many senses.
Yeah. So yeah, working really hard on what do we have? What are we going to be offering this month in our classes? Anything special in your mind?
Well, I'm doing a series on time management.
That sounds
4-week series.
Yep. And so keep an eye on all that. We're doing more NAMA. We'll have that date for you at the end of the session.
Yes.
I feel like there was some other really important news that I wanted to give people.
Yes, it sounded like you almost had it.
I had it
left.
I'm working on the visual games database. That's something for anybody who's bought the book. I've been filming the games slowly and editing the videos. I think I've got like 7 done, and I'll release it when I have 10 done. And then I'll keep making the games until we're done with all of them.
There's a lot.
There are a lot. So, yeah. Oh, I'm going to be doing a webinar for Scentwork University on mastering multiple hides. It's another course that we just released. And I made
February 6th.
Yep. I made a little flow chart for it. And so I'm going to be going over that with Diana and kind of like explaining each of the steps along the way with some video examples, not giving away the whole course, of course. But yeah, so stay tuned for all those things. Should we get right to the topic?
Sure.
Okay, so foundation means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And I want to look in particular, kind of how we did last NAMA, focusing in on NW3 and what does it take to make it to that level, and what are those levels, what are involved in those levels. So let's start looking at NW1, ORT, AKC Novice. What is it about those levels that make those levels that level? Right. I think the most important, most noticeable feature is one hide. There's going to be one hide in that environment. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it definitely changes things when there are multiple hides.
Yes.
Which is why you have a Mastering Multiple Hides course.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just having the one hide, it really becomes just, can your dog go and acquire and source odor in an environment?
Mm-hmm.
So there are other things to think about, but if your dog can do that basic thing, you don't have to think about most of the other things.
Yes, absolutely.
It doesn't, just because I said basic doesn't mean it's always easy.
No, it's not easy. Yeah, I mean, plenty of people get stuck in the NW1 level and don't have the skills they need to really compete at that level.
And sometimes that can be that the dog's confidence doesn't allow them to fully express themselves in new environments. Sometimes the handler stress level doesn't allow them to read their dog in the way they do normally. There can be loads of different things that can make that level very difficult. Icy's NW1 memory photo came up the other day, and she had her first 3 searches were all crazy fast, like 10 seconds or less. And then her 4th search was 45 seconds because she got caught up in pooling and needed quite a bit of time to understand that problem because of her noviceness. So, just because it was one hide on a car didn't mean that it was easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though, quote, technically those hides won't be inaccessible, there won't be distractions in the environment. There are always distractions in the environment, just none intentionally set at those levels. And inaccessible is kind of a matter of opinion. If it's in a box, it's inaccessible, from my opinion. So
yes, and there are people who redefine inaccessible to make it not inaccessible in a box.
Yeah.
And there can be things like that complicated pooling problem. It wasn't that the hide was hard. It was that the wind sucked it into a wheel well and made a complicated problem.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed, is that really competitive people sometimes get really hung up on performing well at that level, like wanting to get placements and things like that. And unfortunately, at the NW1 level, and to a certain degree, the NW2 level, there's a lot of just dumb luck involved. And it's very hard to train for it because of all the variables you don't have in your control. So, for example, I can remember one of the early NW1s that I did. There was a stairway that led into, it was an exterior search, a little short stairway that led into two little kind of like courtyards with picnic tables and benches, and they were separated by a hedge. You could go left or you could go right. If you went left, you got to hide in like 10 or less seconds. If you went right, you had to go all the way around that, and then hopefully you come back and find it. So your search was going to be above 30 seconds at a minimum. And it was just that split choice, just random luck. Either you made the dog go one way or the other, or you followed your dog one way or the other. And if you went left, you did well. If you went right, you did slow. You went slow.
And maybe the wind was helping, and maybe it wasn't,
Yep.
and whatever else.
And I'm sure if you volunteered that you've seen maybe the air conditioning turns on or off, and that helps some or hurts some, and the door is open and closed, and the dog pees in an exterior, and all these little tiny variables that even if they don't cause you to lose a title, can slow you down and make you not get a placement.
Yeah. And I think it's important at that level, because you're going to need it later. And it definitely comes up at NW1 to really internalize that there's no such thing as fair.
Nope.
You know, what the search area you have is not the search area anyone else has, because the time is different. The weather is different. You're different. Your dog is different. And other things may happen. You know, someone may walk in from the public that nobody knew was going to be there, you know, or can bring someone else's barbecue smell into your exterior. Anything could happen. And so trying to think of nosework as fair, trying to think of competition as fair is futile and frustrating. And this earlier we can let go of that idea or hope, the better. And it doesn't mean you can't do well. You can do both very, very well and very poorly in the, you know, less than fair environment that is competition of any kind, really.
In some ways, it doesn't make complete sense to have placements. But because every search is so different, it is fun. I don't want them to take it away. It's an interesting metric to look at and see who was fastest, who was slowest, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you get obsessed with that, that's going to really hold you back from focusing on the things that are important at those levels. Because if you're really competitive at this stage, is it really important to get a first place NW1, or is it important to do really well once you get to elite? And I think you need to, you know, kind of project your dog and your progress in that way. And NW1 is a stepping stone.
And also, you could have done absolutely amazingly well and not end up with any placements.
Absolutely. And yeah,
because you have no control over how anyone else did. And maybe, like he was saying, you turned left when they turned right, whatever else. Like, you could have done the absolute best you ever could do and not end up with placements. And that's hard as a competitive person to find yourself in that situation. But it's important to not take all of your benefit and appreciation of competing out of, you know, did I title, did I place, etc. Because, you know, some people say, well, they just care if they titled or not. I don't really care nearly as much about titling as I do about doing well. And in some instances, that's about the ribbons, the placement ribbons. And a lot of times it's about, you know, did I perform well as a handler? Did my dog perform to the level I expect of them, that I've trained of them, that they, you know, come with innately, and all of those things together, whether or not we ended up in the placements, because again, I have no control over that. And something like being done too quickly can be just as bad or worse as, you know, taking too long, whatever that means.
Absolutely. Because you said you can have a slow search and it was still a good search. I was going to make the opposite point, which is that you can have a really fast search that wasn't a good search.
Yeah.
You can place and still have not performed at your best, or even performed well.
I have gotten ribbons in searches I was not happy with. And I was like, oh, great, a ribbon, that's nice, accolades, whatever. but it didn't make me any happier with the search. I still knew there were things that I did wrong or
Yes.
whatever that should have gone better.
Absolutely. Real quick, let's go over some differences between things. So, AKC Novice versus NW1. What are the big differences between them?
Well, a huge difference is that in AKC, the searches are separated in terms of queuing. So you can get your queue.
There isn't an endurance component like there is in NW1 where you have to get all 4 on one day.
Right.
You don't need that for AKC.
Now you do need.
You might still be
3
testing your
queues.
dogs in endurance
Right.
if you do eight runs in a day, which some people can do.
The first AKC trial Michael ever did, someone else signed him up, and they signed him up for 8 searches in a day, and the dog had never been to any trial
She was
before.
falling asleep at the end.
We can find ways to make the endurance piece hard for our dogs. But so like you could not pass your interior, but still pass your exterior in your container. And, they don't have any bearing on each other. But you do need 3 cues of each to get your overall title or your title in each one. So you get like an interior scent work novice, but you also can get like a scent work novice overall. And they have varied. Whereas NW1 has vehicles. So it's just odor in a different setup. But people do end up kind of liking it or hating it in different ways.
It's worth pointing out to something we didn't mention last time, but might make more of a difference if you're new to this, which is that the way the odor is scented is actually different between the 2 venues.
Yeah.
This applies to every level, but might be, I would say, the most noticeable at the beginning levels.
Depending especially on when you trial and which, and if you suddenly switch between them, or if you've always been trialing in both.
So just in simplistic terms, AKC odor is scented way stronger.
Yeah.
Way stronger. And NACSW is a little bit smaller. Which,
lighter, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, did I say stronger?
You said, I don't know what you said.
It's weaker. No. Did I say weaker? I hope I said
weaker. You didn't say weaker, but whatever you said, I'm pretty sure it made sense.
Yeah. But I think just to interpret that into odor terms about what that means for you and your dog in general, whenever we do odor threshold classes, which we had done for years and years, we did it before AKC. So we were playing around with how much odor the dogs would have to find.
They're not as often to the extreme.
Larger quantities of odor in general, not always, larger quantity of odors are easier to find, harder to source. So the dog finds it from all sorts of places in the room, but has trouble sourcing it. Smaller quantities of odor are harder to find, are less available, but easier to source once they're caught because they don't spread as far. Yeah. But these are very broad generalities.
Yeah.
And so typically if you train only one, then you compete in the opposite venue. So if you only train with really strong odor and then you compete on weak odor, what'll happen, the main thing that you'll run into is the dog may not find the odor. They may not be driven enough to go hunt for the odor because they're always being smacked in the face with it and just sourcing. And in the reverse, if you mostly train with weak odor, your dog might hunt and hunt and hunt, and those dogs tend to false or fringe on the outskirts of odor, where it's about the strength the dog is used to. That doesn't necessarily happen if you've taught the dog very clearly their relationship to source and their hunt drive.
It shouldn't need to happen, but
you can do both. It's not an issue.
Yeah, and we switch between a variety of odor levels regularly in all our classes. And definitely super emphasize the sourcing criteria component. And I think both of those, both switching regularly and making sure that the criteria is the same, should enable most dogs to not have any trouble switching back and forth. Although I think certain individual dogs may need more hand-holding, like maybe we do a couple weeks or a month of just the odor that you're about to go compete in or something, whereas other dogs are so fluent in the whole range that that's less necessary.
Absolutely. Follow-up question here is, do you think the higher concentration at AKC is difficult for a young dog, as in harder to pinpoint? I would say it has nothing to do with the age of the dog. When I watch dogs go outside and roll in garbage and dead fish, dogs don't really have a problem with strong smelling things, not like we do. I can go into a room that smells very strongly and I I don't see the same strong reaction from a dog. Some dogs have very strong reactions to strong smells, but most dogs don't.
Yeah, some dogs are very put off even by smaller concentrations of
Sure.
odor and have to really learn that it's safe in their job and it can be fun and all of that, whereas others would never care or notice.
Yeah. I know a lot of people initially when AKC came out voiced concern with dogs becoming feeling that the odor was aversive to them because it was so strong. I think at this point we can safely say that's not a reasonable fear. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I'm just saying the vast majority of dogs do just fine.
Yeah, and some of the dogs who do find aversive find very small quantities aversive as well.
Exactly. They might find it aversive no matter what you did. Yeah.
And I don't think the odors they're being put on for work are usually very particularly fun either. But if the dog understands the job, create a very positive association with the odor.
So let's move now to talking about the skills and the foundation and what was it that makes NW1 a success for people. So what skills would you say are most important for dog at this level, at ORT, at NW1, at AKC Knowledge? What's novice? What's the most important skill?
Hunt drive.
Hunt drive? I'm going to go out and actually disagree with you and say that the most important skill is going to be odor obedience. That I think hunt drive is very, very important, but so many people are able to succeed at this level without hunt drive because what you need to succeed at this level is a dog who won't walk an odor.
Yeah, I don't,
because the handlers aren't going to read them, so the dog needs to sit longer.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but on my hierarchy of training,
that's how we train.
I'm not solely focused, certainly not solely focused on odor obedience. And I actually have trial dogs who I didn't think were very odor obedient yet and got away with it because I knew how to read them. And I also have no interest in trialing a dog without hunt drive, but lots of people do and have plenty of fun with it.
Well, but also let's unify that a little bit because odor obedience also does mean hunt drive. And let me detangle that a bit for you because you can do all of our hunt drive drills on our website in your living room. And it's all going well and your dog has great hunt drive in that context, and you go to a new context and the dog isn't hunting. Why isn't the dog hunting in those newer contexts? Because they don't value the odor in that context, and that is odor obedience.
Yeah, and I do think that generalization of both hunt drive and odor obedience are really more of the are you going to pass or fail your NW1 or ORT or novice, but it's not necessarily the top thing I'm going to focus on. I'm going to say, I'm going to go to new locations. I'm going to suggest my students go to new locations, but I'm going to focus more on the 4 pillars.
Yeah, but see, okay, this is where what I wanted to get at exactly is when you're going to these new locations, in my opinion, you're working on odor obedience. And because I don't want people to confuse odor obedience with an indication. Because just like I said, you can work on your hunt dive drills in your living room all day long and it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
You can work on your indication drills in your living room all day long. It's not going to help you.
That's not what prioritization of odor in variety of locations.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that ranking of the odor high in the dog's mind is the most important thing in my mind.
Yeah. And you definitely can have hunt drive that doesn't get you anywhere because it's not focused on getting the job done.
What I want is when I go to my trial, if I pull my dog out of the car and the dog goes, I have no idea why I'm here, and they don't start hunting, if they smell odor, they go, oh my gosh, that's why I'm here. And then they kick it on.
Yes.
And then every search after, they're better.
But I would still consider myself as having failed that they didn't start hunting.
Yeah, probably.
Yes.
Go on. What else?
So yeah, I would continue, with the 4 pillars. So if I have odor obedience and hunt drive, I also want confidence.
Confidence, I would say, is very high. So if you look at our 4 pillars foundation stuff, the second pillar is independence. But I wouldn't rank independence super high at this level.
No, not for
search areas are smaller. They tend to be simpler. I'm not saying
you can go with your dog the whole way, so they don't need to be physically independent from you. They might need to be not reading into you.
Exactly. So there's a lot going on there. But while independence is worth training, to me, odor obedience and hunt drive, which we're kind of talking about the same thing, confidence would definitely be number 2.
Yeah. Now, some dogs come with that, and you have to do very little to make sure that's where it's supposed to be. And with other dogs, you may need to even delay trialing to make sure confidence is where it needs to be.
I see a lot of people trialing at this level with dogs who aren't confident enough to go.
And it's hard for them to express themselves in hunting and in their odor obedience and following the odor, once they've caught it. And it can also make trial really negative for a dog who feels extremely insecure about being there. And that doesn't set you up well for, if you have lofty goals with your trialing for this dog, you don't want to have a bunch of negative trial experiences off the bat that you then have to fix.
Absolutely. I would agree
with
that.
What would you put next?
Oh, I was going to ask you.
I know. That's why I got in there real quick.
Okay, number 3 for me. So if we start with hunt drive / odor obedience, and then we move to confidence. Number 3 is going to be a handler skill. It's going to be reading the dog well. That this is really going to set teams apart from the winners and the losers here. Is like 90% of the people who fail their NW1, you watch their videos and you go, well, there it was right there. Why didn't you call it?
Yeah, the dog tried.
Yeah, the dog did their job and you didn't do your job. So reading the dog is going to be big.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that you've practiced blind searches properly with help, that you're not going to string your dog out. So many people who are beginners are very obsessed with being sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to really hold you back. You don't get to be sure at this level.
Yeah.
Your dogs are so inexperienced at this point, unless you've been training for a long time. That's different. But if you're entering trials when we're recommending you to, which is fairly rapidly, you haven't earned the right to be sure. You've got to be prepared to call it a little bit quicker and get some no's.
And to not teach your dog that you're going to ignore them at trials.
Yes.
That's also not good introduction to trialing. If your dog thinks
really
that you become unreliable and refuse to listen and don't like odor anymore and all that stuff.
Absolutely. I think with those 3 things, you can get pretty far.
Yeah.
That's
of course, you'd like to have things like handler knows how to manage the leash well.
You'd like to have really strong pattern training.
Problem solving
abilities, independence. Absolutely. You want all of those things, and there's no reason not to have them. But if I'm going to tell you if I'm on a time crunch and I have to go get a dog ready for NW1, what am I working on? I'm taking my odor out to as many new environments as possible and making it as valuable as possible. I'm making sure that there isn't going to be some confidence stumbling block that's going to derail us completely. I'm going to make sure at this point, I don't have to worry about reading my dog, but let's imagine I was training a dog for someone else. I need to make sure they're not going to call an alert at the trial. And they're not just going to be silent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Is there anything you want to say about how a handler should deal with after, post trial?
Yeah.
When say it's their first trial, like novice, you have to do a bunch of times. You may do your ORT and NW1 multiple times. I've had dogs where I did the NW1 multiple times. But handling after the trial, I think, is of primary importance. And we did talk about trial recovery a couple of months ago. But I think it's really, really important, whether you win or lose after an NW1 or novice, to be able to process it.
Yeah, and did we read this in trial recovery? I think we did.
Yeah, maybe.
It might be worth reading again. But one thing that I will answer your question with very quickly is, I get asked from my students a lot, how do I know I'm ready to trial? And my personal answer is, are you emotionally and psychologically prepared to deal with failure, to learn from your failure and make it a positive experience for you and for your dog? If the answer is yes, then you're ready to trial. It's not about, do you have this or that skill done? It's not about, have you been training for long enough, like there's some amount of time you have to put in before you can trial. It's about, can you learn from a failure? And I know people who skill wise are completely ready to trial, but psychology wise, they shouldn't be trialing because they cannot handle failing. They don't know how to learn from a failure. They don't know how to learn from a success.
Yeah. And our dogs can have their, future trial prospects as well as interest in playing the game with us really derailed by a handler who is angry at the trial. They, whether they're upset with the dog or not, the dog may feel like they're upset with them. It can make trialing an extremely negative situation if we don't know how to manage ourselves emotionally at trial. And sometimes you pass, but you're still upset about something. So this isn't just meaning that you didn't pass the trial. There are plenty of ways things can feel not fair that's hard on people, or something surprising happens that we weren't expecting, and we don't tend to handle that very well. Or our dog doesn't act how we expect them to act, and we don't know how to deal with that. So lots of things to make sure that you know how to handle. And remembering, like a lot of people say all the time, that it's a game, that we're so lucky that we're not hunting for drugs and bombs.
Yeah.
And that we need to not take ourselves and the trial more seriously than we should. Now, I'm not saying don't take it seriously. I take trials very seriously. But they're not life and death, and we have to have levity. I mean, that's part of our games are about stress, but they're also about levity, and that we shouldn't be taking everything so seriously.
More questions about on the way approaching a trial still. What are your thoughts on pairing hides more leading up to a trial? Is that a good idea?
Depends on the dog. I mean, that's the cliche nose for cancer. But there are dogs with whom I would not pair more leading up to a trial, or with whom I don't pair at all. And there are dogs where that might be an excellent morale boost heading up to a trial. So I think you have to evaluate your dog. How even are they between paired and unpaired hides? Are you, is your stickiness where you want it to be? Are you dealing with whether you're pairing or not? Are you reinforcing in a way that's reinforcing your stickiness? But again, as a morale boost, I think it's great for the dog to have this expectation of, I'm going to run in there and it's going to be paired with something great. What you don't want is for the dog to run in there and it's not paired with something great, and they go, I guess I'm not getting paid for this, and leave. So you want to make sure that you are doing your job as the handler either way.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different answer for this, which starts with a definitional question, because I think pairing is one of those words that gets used and people use it in very different ways.
True.
Pairing means very different things to different people. So if you're talking about putting lots of treats on odor and allowing the dog to do lots of self-reward without lots of supplementary rewarding from the handler, that can be useful for certain dogs and certain people, but I wouldn't recommend that in general. I wouldn't
Especially
recommend
not
that
leading up to a trial.
style of pairing generally, although it is a necessary step for certain dogs who maybe have been rushed to be put on odor and things like that.
Or a brief influx of that can be useful.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Now, if you're talking, so the advantage of pairing for me is that the dog spends a little bit less time focusing on getting clues from the handler, and rather turns to the environment, looks for clues directly from the environment. So in achieving that goal, I just want the odor paired with just enough food that the dog recognizes that as a piece of food. So not a crumb, but not a big piece that overshadows the odor. And then when the dog finds it, I'm going to supplement with extra food. That is great. All the way up to the trial, I think. And before that, that's what I recommend to most of my students that they do almost all of the time, with periodic tests to make sure they aren't accidentally overshadowing the odor. If anything, if you're doing that so consistently, if anything, I would say giving the dog more exposure to less pairing before a trial, not too much that the dog starts looking to you because you're anticipating, especially if you're the kind of person who, when you stop pairing, he gets nervous that the dog's not going to do it right, and then you're being jumpy.
Yeah, trying to get in before they've landed on source.
Don't do that. Let them land on source and just pay them normally. That's probably a good thing to do before trial. If you're the kind of person who doesn't pair until you're about to trial, maybe you should reevaluate what you think the value of pairing is.
Yeah, and now I've also known dogs who, a little unusual, but the handler had been pairing probably almost exclusively, maybe 98% of the time for a couple years, with occasional trials here and there. So it's not like the dog was never seeing unpaired odor, but mostly at trial. And then she didn't pair one day in class, and the dog would go to the hide and just walk off, just leave. So the dog had clearly disconnected from the
Yes.
idea that the handler could also come in and pay. And so I think if you are pairing regularly, that's great, but you should check, like Michael was talking about, periodic checks, but you need to make sure that the dog has the same, like, yes, I'm here at odor, I expect to get paid, whether it's paired or not, so that you don't lose anything, because it's what people tend to worry about. The people who don't pair, a lot of what they worry about is that the dog won't have any indication when it's not paired.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for that to be the case if you're doing what we generally suggest, which is allowing the dog to reconnect with source, coming in with more treats, reconnect with source, come in with more treats. The dog is going to have such a strong expectation of multiple sniffs of that odor with payment coming in that they should not ever think to just wander away when they didn't get paid, because source always is so good at paying them generously.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that completely. And I often tell my students, when we're past the imprinting phase, when we're past the intro to odor phase, I would say if I felt like I had to pair, that's probably the time where I'm least likely to pair. I don't want to pair because I have to. I want the dog finding odor.
Like, we don't like pairing as a Band-Aid.
Keep in mind, on top of that you should be rewarding the dog really well with enthusiasm and sincerity and good treats and all that. So if the dog needs one piece of treat on that odor to find it, what are you doing wrong that the odor isn't that valuable in of itself? Because you're going to pay them multiple times on the same hide. So what are you doing wrong that the dog's willing to do it for a piece of food on the ground, but not willing to do it for a piece of food in your hand?
Yeah.
That's a relationship issue.
Where's the clarity lacking for the dog as well?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes we do just amazingly accidentally confuse our dogs. And then we have to untangle, where did this lack of clarity come from? And then how do I fix it?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think for the average person, the average student, when they're getting ready to trial, I start telling them to make sure they're pairing.
New locations.
Pair. Yeah.
Those are because the same everywhere would be the overarching theme of that.
Absolutely. But I would have hoped that they had never stopped pairing. I suspect that a lot of my students do.
And when Michael says stop pairing, I think you mean stop pairing completely.
Yeah.
Because generally you're recommending about 90% pairing, not 100% pairing.
I'm recommending 100% pairing.
Are you?
I am.
You didn't used to.
Yeah. I have for quite a while.
I don't recommend
since Lumi
100%
was pretty
pairing.
Advanced. Yeah. The only times I recommend not pairing is when you're doing inaccessibles.
Yes, well, that, and for some people that may be more of a component than we recommend also.
Yeah.
But I do think I have seen some fallout from people not having enough influx of odor is the same either way. But that kind of thing really depends on the dog. There are dogs where you don't need to make sure they really understand it's the same either way, and dogs where you do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else in preparation for competing that's useful. Again, we're in the foundation stage. We're talking to people who may be newer to this.
Yeah, why don't you also define what you mean by advanced foundation versus foundation?
I don't mean anything. It's a marketing ploy to get you to buy a second course. It's a great course, by the way.
So you're continuing to build on the same components that you did in your foundation, pushing things to be more complicated, whatever else.
Yeah. So what I was getting at about prepping for the trial is making sure your dog is used to the crate, making sure your dog can potty on command, making sure your dog is good on car rides,
resting between searches, that they're not like pacing and panting and spinning.
A lot of people at this stage, they drive the dog to class. The dog is amped the whole class because it's getting out and running. They haven't learned to settle yet.
Yeah.
That doesn't become a priority until they go to the trial and the dog is fussing the whole time and they realize this is a problem. So the more you can work on that now, the better. And that's partially because the average pet owner doesn't make their dog spend a lot of crate time at home.
Yeah, or rest time at all. Time where they're not either doing something with them or
driving them somewhere where there's nothing fun.
Yeah.
My dogs get to do that all the time. I drive them to a class or workshop. They sit in the car all day. They barely get to do anything. They sleep. And they learn really quickly to settle down. This stuff is really important.
And it definitely makes a difference for your searches. If your dog has been resting they're much more likely to be focused and able to complete their search as well than if they've been stressing all
Something
day.
else that you don't want to learn the hard way. I learned the hard way. Don't change anything on a trial day. If you want to try something new, you do it at class. You don't do it at a trial. The mistake I made was buying a special new treat. I bought her.
We did it twice actually.
Yeah,
2 different trials.
yeah. I think the first time it was like Lumi's first NW1,
Yeah.
and we went through McDonald's, and I think I bought her a fish sandwich, and I cut it into fourths, one
Four
for each
searches.
search. Yeah, and she loved it, except she threw the whole thing up at the end of the day.
Yeah, not during a search, fortunately.
No, not during a search. And so yeah, if you're gonna use treats, different treats, try them in class before you try them at the trial.
But another time, because that you could argue that that's because there's who knows what in McDonald's and maybe just bothered her stomach. But another time we decided to go with like a higher value meat for a trial than we had ever used in class, and we were trialing cinnamon and Lumi. And they were both so amped up about just the smell and the idea of these treats that there was falsing and trying to get the food from us instead of working and just nonsense that if we had trained through it would not have needed to happen.
Remember that trial where we left a bag of chips near your dog's crate and
Yes.
she ate the whole bag of chips?
I do. We were at the briefing and she somehow, I still don't know how she did it because the chips weren't very near her crate, but she somehow got her
She was
little
very
arm.
food motivated.
Very food motivated. She's a good nose dog most of the time. Pulled the whole bag up to her crate and then ate through all of it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much salt.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so yeah, and saying training on other dog odor if you train alone, that's super important. If the first time your dog smells that in a search is at a trial, that can derail you.
Yeah, good luck. I think in those cases you either have to go places that other dogs frequent, like parks.
This is
in dog training spaces, or you have to get a friend to bring you slobber, bring their dog to do stuff in your search area,
or attend a class.
Yeah,
attend a workshop. Go travel just a bit to attend a class once or twice to give your dog that exposure, and ask the instructor if you can run towards the end so your dog can get exposure to that. This is something that's becoming more and more popular in dog sports, which is conditioning, making sure your dog is the correct weight for their size, making sure the dog is eating the right types of food.
Good core, good muscling.
Absolutely, that they have the endurance to work the whole day, even though your total time at the end of the day at these trials is probably going to be only a few minutes. You'd be surprised at how tired your dog will be at the end of that day.
Yeah. And the harder the hides get, the more complicated they get, the more they need that physicality to work them out well. And I do think that physicality is very tightly tied to confidence. And if your dog is strong and secure in themselves physically, they're more likely for confidence things not to bother them as much. That's not always true, but there are a lot of confidence things you can usually get rid of with better physicality, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah. So now let's get into the day of trial and talk about the trial strategy. What are some good strategy tips for people wanting to bring out the best in their dog, show off their dog's training, perform well? If you were trying to win the NW1, what were some tips that you would give them?
I would not wear my dog out wandering around the potty area for longer than necessary,
or exercising your dog before the trial,
or exercising them, or with few caveats to that. And I would also not be doing the warm-up boxes over and over again. I probably wouldn't do them at all.
Yeah.
But if I did do them at all, I would do them once.
Yep. Before they get smashed up by all the dogs at the trial, if you can.
Slobbered up, smashed up. They're a mess within minutes usually.
I have a lot of students that I've recommend to go to a park before the trial and do a quick search to blow off some steam. These are very specific situations where they have dogs or they as handlers tend to fall apart in the first search of the day.
And then do well for the rest of it.
Exactly. So this is specifically for them. And it can be important for the right dog. So you just got to know your dog more than anything. But I think a lot of times people want to overdo that and over exercise the dog before a trial. And then, a very strenuous experience at trial becomes even harder for them than it needed to be.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't like that they're kind of stuck in their car or near their car. It's a little looser in AKC than it is in NACSW. And so the tendency to give and their dog maybe isn't so good at hanging out. especially in a crate, but maybe they just have them in the car as well. And so they try to blow off that steam by wandering them around. And then the dog's having to deal with all these other dogs that are out there, and the mental component of that, whether it's excitement or stress or aggression or whatever related to being around all these other dogs. And they're usually less focused by the time they get into their search. And I think if you're someone who finds it very hard to just be in your car, your dog finds it very hard, it's good to find things for yourself to do that you can do in that situation. Like some people like coloring books. I find them super stressful if I'm waiting at a trial, so I don't do that, but works for really well for some people.
One of the strategy techniques is their competitors about the trial. Don't or nose work generally. These people at the parking lot who are complaining about how many times they failed, how they're going to quit if they fail one more time.
Negative things should not be getting in your head on the day of trial.
Yes. Shield them as much as possible from the parking lot activity. Don't leave them in their crate with your car open, watching all the other dogs, etc. Yeah.
Good comment.
Park your dog in such a way that they're not facing all the other dogs, right?
Yeah. I always have them either covered or hatched down or whatever, because it's it's not a normal situation for dogs to have all of that going on and feel sort of stuck.
Yeah. But to go back to my point, I've had a lot of students that I've had to really strongly encourage that they don't engage in the parking lot chit chat and sequester themselves in their car, because it is really psychologically damaging, in my opinion, to your success for you to hear all the negativity and feel that. And
you may have finished a search, but still hear something that is wrong. Well, wrong or right can throw you off.
Or non-relevant. Even.
Yeah, or non-relevant. And so you just don't want to hear anything. Like none of that's going to be helpful for your next search and your next search after that.
Exactly. Other tips, I would say, when you get to that search, you have to trust your training. You're here now, and now it's time to let your dog do what you train them to do, and not nag them, micromanage them, or critique them too much. That doesn't mean you go completely hands off. Do what your trainers have told you to do in terms of your handling, in terms of your search area coverage. Kind of have a sense of what things are taking too long or not long enough. But I see a lot of people trying to do too much of the search for their dog.
Yeah.
Try to follow your dog. If you're gonna win an NW1, you need to follow your dog to the odor and not lead them there, because you will be slower than your dog.
Yeah. A dog is the only one who can win an NW1.
Correct.
And I, as a point of strategy, and I'm not saying this training wise at all, but as a point of strategy in NW1, I would probably give, if it's important to me to try to pass that day, I'm going to give my dog about the first half of the search. And then if they have not gotten anywhere near solving anything, I don't think they've caught anything, whatever, then I may insert myself and try to get them around the wind and see if they can catch something. And then I'm going to go, oh, I shouldn't have had to do that in a trial. Why did I have to do that?
And not only that,
next day,
when you do that, you should also think, have I missed something? Maybe maybe
my dog totally told me and I missed it.
I missed it. Exactly. Because that happens. And so think about that. Why is my dog taking so long? Those are all important questions you should be asking yourself as a handler.
Yep.
Yeah. What other strategy for during the trial day? I think Dave's making a very fantastic point, which I'll read and modify slightly for myself. Don't worry about your last search. The only search that counts is the next one. And I would say don't worry about any search other than the one that's right in front of you.
The current one.
Yeah, because sometimes people are fixated on what they did in the last search. And they're like, oh, I didn't cover well enough, or I was slow, or I blurted an alert, or whatever it might be. Focus on what you're doing right now.
But sometimes they're also worrying about the next search, and they're
or the ribbon at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're worrying about, oh, we don't do so well in containers, or I didn't practice vehicles enough, or whatever. Don't sit in your parking lot worrying about stuff. Nope. Give your brain something else to do. And yes, only worry about when you've been called up to your search. You've potted your dog properly. You have your equipment. You have your treats. You go to the search. Now you are fully focused and present in the search. What are you supposed to be doing? Reading your dog, following your dog, managing your leash, whatever else. And then after this, finding the hide, celebrating with your dog, getting them back to rest. Maybe writing down where you found the hide. If you want to do that, we often recommend that. People make short notes about the search, whether it's drawing it or whatever, after the search. But part of that is also to help that let your brain let go of it. You've written it down or you've drawn it, and now you can let go. You don't need to keep obsessing about it. If you need to go back and review things more, you're going to do that the next day or the next week.
Absolutely. Okay, I think I'm trying to think about if there's anything else that I want to say strategy-wise, because strategy for the lower levels is pretty simple. Just I used to say there were 3 rules, but now I can't remember what they are. Don't get in your dog's way. Hang on, I can find it. Talk for a second. Any other strategy?
Another strategy thing is that, in NW1 or novice, your time stops when you call alert. So you don't need to feel like you have to give the dog one treat and rush off to the next thing because you finished it. So you can give your dog, you can have a slightly longer celebration moment with them, give them more treats, make them feel like finding this hide in a trial environment was amazing, because you're not on the clock anymore. Now, if you take forever, you're just going to say, okay, thank you, let's go. But don't make your dog feel like things are worse at trial than they are in your regular practice. And also to kind of that point, we tend to, when we teach a change of equipment, we tend to teach, when you're first introducing it, you put it on right before the search, take it on right after the search. But at trial, that can mess you up. You should put your equipment on at the last staging area or as you're approaching the judge's steward, not when your dog is at the start line and trying to interpret the odor information that they're getting. And you should be watching the information that your dog is processing and not focused on getting a harness or a collar on them and switching leashes around. Be as ready as possible as you approach. And you also don't need to take the time where the next dog is supposed to be coming in, changing their equipment back again when you're in the search area at the hide. Get out of the search area, celebrate with the dog, get out of the search area, on your way back towards the parking lot. And then if you want to switch your stuff around, you can. But we don't need to stick to some of the tight things we do to teach the dog a concept when you're in trial.
I found it.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about the strategy for handling the dog is based on 3 assumptions. The 3 assumptions that I'm going to give my beginning handlers is that 1, the hide can be anywhere in the search area. This is really important. It can be anywhere, not just where you think it is, not just where it's likely to be. The hide can be anywhere in the search environment.
Don't think too much about where the hide could be ahead of time. Some people watch the walkthrough videos and go, I would put a hide here, I would put a hide there. It's not going to help you to think about that.
Number 2, air currents play a large role in how odor travels through the search area and how your dog acquires the odor. Any movement from the handler disturbs the air currents. Okay, that's something to think about.
But not a suggestion that you should be a statue.
It's not a suggestion at all. It's an assumption. 3, the dog is a better searcher than the handler. Okay, that's our 3rd assumption. Based on those assumptions, we've got 2 rules for the beginning levels. This doesn't apply to NW2 or NW3 or Elite. There are some ways where it can apply, but the 2 rules are 1, stay out of your dog's way, and 2, disturb the search area as little as possible. And again, that can mean a lot of different things. There are times where disturbing the search area actually helps the dog. Those are rare, but it's worth mentioning that there are exceptions to these rules.
And also that staying out of your dog's way doesn't mean you're dancing around trying to get out of their way every second, because that's probably disturbing them and the search area.
So I include here a list of ways that we get in our dog's way. So 1, the leash getting too tight, obviously. 2, the leash getting so loose that it gets tangled in the environment. 3, the handler blocks the wind. 4, the handler blocks the dog's path. 5, the handler distracts the dog by talking or making distracting movements, including reaching for treats, presenting, repeating search commands, spending too much time without moving, etc. Now, there are times where you have to interrupt the search and restart the dog. There are times where that happens. You got to know when to break these rules. But those are some of the ways that you're likely to get in your dog's way at an NW1. And if you send me NW1 videos that you've passed or failed, you're likely to hear me comment on one of these things at least.
Yeah.
Okay. What about after the search, after the trial day?
Yeah. Well, we're strong believers in celebrating.
Yes. Always celebrate that day. Find something good.
Yeah. For some people, that's going through a drive-through, getting an ice cream. For us, it's often going out to dinner if we have time.
Right. But also the something good. For some people, that is just that my dog didn't pee.
Yeah. Right. So I'm talking about celebrating.
Yeah.
You're talking about finding the good thing that happened,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't.
I think that's the harder
wanted.
part. I think people generally know how to celebrate.
But they don't always.
No,
People
that's
don't
true.
take
That's
the
true.
time to celebrate.
That's true.
And it doesn't have to be big and expensive either, but still finding a way to celebrate that you got out there and you did something, and there has to be something good that your dog did, even if it wasn't.
Send
what
an
you
email
wanted.
to your training partner or your instructor saying the things you did great and that you were happy with.
Yeah.
It's a good way to celebrate.
It is. Yeah. So you need to evaluate what went well, even if you didn't cue.
Not what went poorly. Okay. Don't twist this into a way of critiquing yourself. We're
Yeah.
going to do that the
Yeah.
next day. Okay.
So then that's your day one. And then you and your dog get a good dinner and get a good sleep. And then the next day or the next week, and you can do it by yourself or you could do it with your instructor or someone else, you're going to look at what went wrong. And that may incorporate looking at your videos where you may find some things that went wrong that you didn't know about and some things that went right that you didn't know about. But this is your chance to be critical and figure out where your training needs to go before your next trial.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the only other thing I would say is make that training plan. And part of that training plan should be, when am I trialing next? I really don't like hearing in general that you've got 4 trials in a row that you don't know you're ready for. You know? It's like, well, you haven't given yourself enough time to train for the next trial after whatever happens in the first trial.
Yeah, and that can be a challenge of any kind of trial, but especially, AKC, you tend to have a lot of, unless you're in a trial impoverished area, but you tend to have a lot of trial opportunities. So you may have multiple back-to-back weekends or, several trial opportunities within a month, and there may really not be time to address what happened in a trial before the next trial. And so sometimes, depending on what went wrong, you may need to take an intentional break from trialing so that you don't have that pressure on you to address what you want to address and then go back to trialing. And it's usually not as long as people may worry about, but some things shouldn't be fixed while you're in the midst of trialing, because something's probably going to get worse before it gets better, and you're going to add more stress and confusion, and you and your dog both act differently at trial. And so if you are, not able to create a consistent, clear picture for your dog to teach them what you want to teach them, it's just going to be frustrating and not as much progress as it could be.
Yeah. Dave's bringing up a really great point, which is to pay attention, but don't obsess about being ready to go to the first staging area.
So this is when you're in the parking lot.
Yeah, this is back at the trial, getting ready for your search. And I do see this a lot where people want to be over prepared and ready.
Yeah.
That extra time, Dave is saying this, that extra time that you're waiting in the parking lot is stressful. It is stressful for the dog. The dog's wasting valuable energy.
Yeah. It's also stressful on the people who are ahead of you who are still waiting in the parking lot.
And for the volunteers who have to corral. And that's another thing. Sometimes you're at a trial where the volunteers are rushing you, and everyone's different temperamentally, but try not to let them make you feel rushed.
Yeah.
If that means you need to tell them, I'll be ready when it's my turn. We're right here. Just telling them we're here. We're getting ready. Just allowing them to leave you alone.
Yeah, I try to let the parking lot person know without being, too direct or pushy, but let them know that I'm very actively paying attention and I will be ready. And when they call for me, I try to respond really promptly, because sometimes and I've been the parking lot person a lot, but sometimes they're calling for someone 5 or 6 times, and and they're starting to sound frantic because they can't find them. And then the person's like, I'm here. And it's like, yes, thank you for finally responding. So yes, that's important. Someone just said practice staging before trial,
which we have a lesson on that on our website in the patterns and handling course.
Yes, we've done classes just on staging. Of course, we've done other things too, but really focus on staging. I think your staging and your walk from staging to the search can make or break a search, or at least can make or break how efficiently the search goes. I think, I tend to run high drive, high arousal dogs. And if their arousal is making them an absolute mess going up to the start line, we're probably not going to have our best, most effective search. Yeah. So there are a lot of nitty gritty details, but they used to, and maybe some places they still do, they used to call people up fairly early before they really got to go to the real staging area. And my first nosework dog was a really bad boredom barker, and it would be helpful for no one for her to be out staging early. So I would talk to the parking lot person, and I would let them know I'm completely ready. She's pottied. I have all my stuff. As soon as that next thing opens up, I will be there if you let me know. And they were usually very willing to work with me, because often, people stand at the parking lot staging area more because they're anxious to get going than that it actually helps for them to be there. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But communicate. Don't do things that are against what they asked you to do without talking to them, because then they'll just be really frustrated with you.
Yeah, and Mary is also mentioning about not being rushed even at the start line, mm-hmm. that recognize you have enough time to give your dog a good start line and not feel like everyone's waiting for you to go.
Yeah, I have never been told to hurry up at a start line.
No. And it could happen if you took too long, but
as a judge, I did once have to tell someone to hurry up at a start line, but that's because they were 15 feet back messing with their timer for 3 full minutes, and it became excessive, and I had to ask them to get on to the search. But it's extraordinarily rare. So yeah, if you're there, obviously you and your dog are prepping to walk through that start line, they're usually more than happy to let you do whatever you need to do.
Okay, we've got one more question, and then we're probably going to call it a night. So this question is about residual odor and training dirty. So my friend and I were training today, and she's really sterile with her odor handling and training, and I train dirty. One search, I picked up 2 hides before we ran the area again, playing a variation on the 30-second game, and her dog alerted on where the hides had previously been. This started a discussion about residual odor and how a dog can tell the difference between odor on Q-tip and odor sitting where a Q-tip had previously been. In this case, the hide was in a straw, but the ends of the Q-tips are sticking out a little bit, so the Q-tips may have touched the surface it was sitting on. So my question is, can and should we expect the dog to tell the difference between source and residual if the Q-tip was actually touching the surface it was moved from? When training with residual, should I always be careful about making sure the Q-tips aren't sticking out at all and potentially touching the surface they're placed on? My dog doesn't seem to have an issue differentiating between source and this type of residual, but I'm wondering if it's not a fair question for him. It's very funny that you have answered your own question, or I should say your dog has answered the question. And anybody observing can tell you that there are clearly plenty of dogs who know how to tell the difference. And if you train your dog, they can tell the difference. So the question about whether or not it's possible is answered by the dogs. It's absolutely possible.
But if you don't set it up for them, then it won't be possible.
Is it fair? That's another question. Is it fair to ask a dog to do this? Well, I, again, would ask you to look at the dogs and tell me how distressed do you think that they are? Do you think the dogs are really distressed trying to make these decisions? And in my experience, no, they are not distressed. They seem very, it's something very natural to a dog to have to ignore rabbit scent. There was a rabbit. There's not a rabbit anymore. There was a hot dog. There's not a hot dog anymore. This is not something particularly complicated for dogs. I don't know why we decide to make it complicated on odor. But I think was it unfair for your friend's dog to be thrown into it like that? Maybe.
Well, it sounds like that dog and handler in particular had some distress because of confusion in that situation.
Absolutely. So that's worth having a discussion on. Oh, do you want this skill? And if you do, here are the training steps to get it, because my dog can do it. And you can see that my dog can do it.
Yeah. Now, I will say that I generally try to make an effort for the Q-tips to not at all be sticking out of a scent vessel.
I do too.
For both the potential transfer of oil, because I don't like to have oil transfer if I can avoid it.
But also the optics of it.
Also, I don't want to get whatever junk is in the environment on my Q-tips if I can keep that from happening. I want my Q-tips clean as well. So I would suggest making the effort to get your Q-tips a little more tucked into your scent vessels.
Yeah. So the question where I was going there was, why would you want the dog to do this? And it's my opinion that dogs who can work through residual odor will work through pooling odor and other complicated odor problems more efficiently in trial.
Now, I generally am not very concerned about, so if we look at how people generally define lingering and residual, they define them separately. And I know I read something yesterday that was defining these a little bit differently than I do, but I'll define them how I would, which is that lingering is hanging out odor molecules, and residual is oil transfer. And so I don't try to have oil transfer, generally speaking, in my searches. I try to avoid that, but I don't try to avoid lingering at all. And I do think that lingering is extremely like pooling, whereas I'm not sure. I am undecided on residual in that way.
Yeah, actual oil on the surface. Because if I put a drop of oil in the environment, that's odor.
Yeah,
it absolutely is odor. So yeah, there's a certain. It's true, but anyways, the way we do it, where we have our odor contained in tins and we move it around, or even if you put a Q-tip down and you move it, it's unideal. But I don't think that the dogs will have a problem with it. Your dog didn't have a problem with it. I doubt any of my dogs would have a problem with it. My dog might show some more interest than normal because that's a little bit stronger of residual than they're probably used to seeing in an environment. But it would take a few repetitions before the dog started to dismiss it as not relevant. What are they looking for? They're looking for the vessel.
Yeah, scented Q-tips in a scent vessel.
Exactly. That's what they're looking for.
And I think then the question is, do you actually want them working off of actual oil?
Not for our purposes.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
And that's why we would
someday there may be a competition that does that.
Yeah, but that's why we would avoid actual residual.
Gosh, I would make hide placement a lot easier if all I had to do was put an oil drop wherever I wanted it to be.
Yeah, it'd also be very messy.
It would be very messy.
But I do. Where was I going with this? Oh, okay. I'll go somewhere else because I don't remember. So yes, I think try to avoid actual residual. I would not try to avoid actual lingering. I think working through lingering is extraordinarily valuable, and that dogs who respond to lingering strongly, which I know lots of dogs who do, there's not residual odor there, but the dog is going, oh my gosh, there was a hide here before, and I think this should pay me. I think in general, those dogs have more trouble working through pooling than dogs who work through that regularly. But I also think the handler's definitions make all the difference. And I think that, so like I define source the way Michael just did, scented Q-tips in a scent vessel. And when I define it that way, I don't have to worry about the lingering molecules sitting on that chair, because that's clearly not source the way I've defined it for myself. And I think self-defining it also really helps define it for your dog, because then you respond to them in accordance with your definition of what source is and what you want them to do within a search. And if that's hazy, then it's going to be hazy for the dog, which is never good.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
I'm also all for reuse of search areas. Like, new search areas are great. Go out and find new search areas, but don't feel like you need to find new search areas all the time to avoid lingering. I think that actually causes problems and is unnecessary.
Hopefully that answers your question. And hopefully we've covered basic level competitions and how your foundation leads up to those trials. Let me know if you enjoyed this. Our next NAMA is going to be
in late February.
Once again, we hope we'll see you in California if you're there.
Yes, if you're in California or not in California and want to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it will be February. Do you want to do the 17th or the 24th?
24th.
Okay. February 24th.
February 24th. Hope to see you guys there.
5 p.m. Central.
Okay. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.